I wasn't supposed to care about humans. None of us were. When our coalition scouts first swept their little yellow star, their soul, the system barely registered a blip on our charts. 8 planets, most of them dead, a belt of shattered stone, a few gas bags swirling in silence. And then, that third world. Our probe dropped into orbit expecting nothing special. Instead, it found a globe drowning in life. Forests, seas, storms, creatures everywhere. A messy, loud, unpredictable biosphere. Even the oceans carried floating scars, patches of debris so dense the scanners had trouble reading the currents. And beneath all that, a single sapient species. Humans. Our analysts laughed when they saw the footage. 8 billion of them, armed with crude machines, flickering communication networks, and a ring of failed spaceships rusting above their atmosphere. They'd clearly tried to reach space, but the graveyard around their planet told the whole story. Attempts, failures, attempts again, more failures. Most species, once they learned the sky could be broken, would pour everything they had into escaping their cradle. But not humans. They seemed more interested in fighting each other, building cities that toppled when the ground shook, and tossing junk into orbit for future archaeologists to complain about. Every expert predicted the same thing. They were at least 4 centuries away from real spaceflight. Longer for FTL, maybe never. We never cataloged a species so stubbornly slow. So, after a few weeks of scans, the probe did what it was programmed to do: leave. There were real systems to study, systems rich in resources and strategic value. Earth wasn't even worth a second orbit. If only we had understood then what we were turning our backs on. Because while we ignored that blue planet at the edge of nowhere, the galaxy around it began to tear itself apart. A conflict erupted between 2 of our own member races, the brutal, iron-fisted Xansi and the gentle, diplomatic Danik. Everyone knew who started it, and everyone knew who would lose. The Danik were peaceful, underdefended, and new to the coalition. They didn't have the political weight to beg for help, and no one wanted to anger the Xansi. So in 2 days, the Xansi razed one Danik world, conquered the other, and used their influence to vote the shattered survivors out of the coalition entirely. 7 billion Danik fled the fire. A few billion more vanished into Xansi labor camps. And then, someone, with a voice oily from self-interest, made a suggestion in the Senate. Why not send the Danik to the Sol system? Let them meet the humans first. If the humans are worthless, we lose nothing. If the Danik die, well, they were already useless. Cold logic won the vote. 52 massive Danik colony ships, packed to bursting with refugees, children, elders, families with nothing left but grief, jumped alone towards Earth. A desperate people sent to a species we barely considered capable of building a functional ladder, much less a starship. No escorts, no supplies, no way back. We didn't expect a warm welcome. We definitely didn't expect what happened next. Because when our second probe finally arrived to observe the primitive humans meeting the Danik, it found something no one in the coalition had ever seen. Earth wasn't collapsing under the weight of the refugees. It was thriving. Its people, those slow, stubborn, planet-bound humans, had opened their doors, their cities, their industries. Half of the Danik ships were already stripped for parts in orbit. The debris field that once choked their skies, gone, cleaned. Construction sites roared across continents. Entire city blocks were printed, literally printed into existence in weeks. Danik transports that once hauled grain were now mining asteroids. Human engineers had reverse-engineered Danik particle shields, anti-gravity systems, and even FTL drives. Within months, new ships were lifting off Earth, ships faster than anything the Danik ever built themselves. We stared at the data in silence, unable to make sense of it. The same species we had written off as slow, the same species whose orbit was a junkyard of dead dreams, the species we mocked, had adapted faster than any civilization in known history. And somewhere deep in their atmosphere, under clouds and storms and neon skylines, humans were doing something no one had ever seen them do before. They were getting ready. Nobody knew for what. But the Zansi thought they did, and they decided to put an end to it.
The Danik didn't arrive as explorers. They didn't arrive as diplomats. They arrived as a people on the edge of extinction. 52 colossal colony ships limped into the Sol system like wounded beasts, scarred hulls, flickering drives, entire sections welded over just to keep the atmosphere from venting. Behind every porthole was a face that had lost everything. They expected fear, suspicion, maybe even gunfire. Instead, humans came up to meet them. Tiny, fast-built shuttles, ugly metal bricks with engines that screamed like they hated their jobs, rose from Earth's surface and escorted the Danik ships to safe orbit, broadcasting messages in dozens of languages, some cheerful, some formal, some so awkwardly translated you couldn't help but feel they were trying their absolute best. When the Danik stepped onto Earth's soil for the first time, they weren't met with soldiers, they were met with volunteers. People holding signs in languages the Danik couldn't read, kids handing out water, entire neighborhoods converted into shelters overnight. Humans didn't just welcome them, they reorganized themselves around them, as if hosting 7 billion guests was just another Tuesday problem. For the first time since their worlds burned, the Danik slept without the sound of orbital bombardment. They didn't know they were being watched. The Coalition had sent another probe, this one armed with powerful telescopes, high-band sensors, and a nervous team of researchers expecting to see riots, overcrowding, starvation. What they found instead stunned the entire department. Humans adapted at a pace that bordered on impossible. Factories retooled themselves in days, entire construction sectors ballooned overnight, tower-sized machines rolled across empty land, printing buildings layer by layer, homes, schools, hospitals, like children building with blocks. Danik tech didn't intimidate them, it fascinated them. Where other species studied new technology for years before touching it, humans cracked it open, pulled out the glowing parts, argued at whiteboards, and then somehow made it better. A Danik particle shield that barely held off a meteor, humans reinforced it until it shrugged off railgun fire. A basic FTL drive meant for slow colony travel, humans re-engineered it to the point that even our military analysts asked if the readings were typos. And the strangest part, they didn't seem proud of it. They didn't strut, they didn't boast, they didn't declare themselves a rising power. They just worked, quietly, relentlessly, together. I remember one researcher whispering as she watched the footage, "Do they even realize what they're building?" Because visible or not, a storm was forming around Earth, made of industry, ingenuity, and an anger that wasn't theirs, but borrowed from the Danik they'd taken in. The Zansi noticed. Of course they noticed. They had lost a race they considered weak and pliable, a race they believed they'd broken forever. Seeing the Danik rebuild under human protection was an insult the Zansi military couldn't swallow. And so the calls started. Not diplomatic ones, not warnings, but demands. Demands for the return of Zansi property. Demands for the surrender of Danik survivors. Demands that Earth submit to inspection, oversight, military co-opting. The humans sent a message back. It was short, calm. It ended with, "You don't own people." For the Zansi, that was enough to justify war. The Senate, too timid to deny their most powerful military faction, ultimately agreed to let the Zanzi settle the situation. Settle, of course, meant annihilate. 100 warships gathered, carriers, destroyers, battleships, cruisers, and at the center of it all, a dreadnought, a planet killer, something you pointed at a world when you wanted that world removed from star charts, not conquered. This wasn't a fleet, it was an execution order. Thousands of fighters, hundreds of transports built for occupation, a machine designed to swallow a civilization whole. The Zanzi weren't planning to fight, they were planning to erase. No one believed humans could stand up to them. They barely understood FTL a year earlier. Their orbit used to be a scrapyard. Their drives used to blow up on launch pads. They were builders and dreamers and loud, argumentative creatures with no sense of galactic scale. They weren't warriors. Except something had changed, because when the Zanzi fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, massing near the great gas giant to stage their attack, a dozen human ships were already waiting near Earth, then 24, then 30, then 50. Jump signatures flickered across the asteroid belt like a storm made of light, ships appearing where ships should exist, vessels that hadn't existed a year prior, hulls bearing hybrid designs of human stubbornness and Danic precision. Humanity didn't wait to be attacked, they accelerated, straight into the dark between Mars and the Belt, a battlefield no one had expected them to choose, and for the first time in galactic history, the Zanzi realized they were not the hunters this time, they were prey.
The Zanzi expected a slaughter, clean, one-sided, over in minutes. They didn't expect to be matched. When their armada surged past the asteroid belt, bristling with weapons and confidence, the human fleet was already forming up near Mars. Not dozens of ships anymore. 60. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers that had no right to exist yet. Ships born in factories that hadn't even been factories the year before. Humanity had no reputation for military power. They'd never fought a space war, never fired on another species, never built weapons meant to pierce planetary shields. But humans build like creatures trying to outrun their own extinction. And the Danic had given them blueprints. Blueprints humans had improved. Blueprints humans had accelerated. The two fleets closed in across the void, Mars hanging beneath them, cold and red and silent. A stage for a war no one was supposed to witness. The first volley came from the Zanzi. It should have shattered the human front line. It should have ripped their formation apart. Instead, it crashed against shields that glowed with a strange, aggressive hue. Danic tech, yes, but reinforced with human engineering so brutally effective, one of our analysts muttered. That shouldn't be possible. The humans answered fire with fire, and suddenly the impossible became fact. A Zanzi destroyer, the kind that had terrorized half the spiral arm, took a direct hit and spiraled out of formation, trailing debris like blood in water. Shock rippled through their comms. Our probe recorded it all. For the first time in Zanzi history, they hesitated. The battle devolved into a brutal exchange, cruise missiles turning to molten metal, beams carving scars across hulls, carrier wings swarming like clouds of steel insects. Where Danic ships once would have buckled under pressure, the human-modified versions held the line with a ferocity that felt almost personal. It wasn't a fleet defending a planet, it was a planet defending its new people. The Zanzi couldn't understand that. Most of the coalition still doesn't. Hours passed. 50 Zanzi ships remained, one battered dreadnought and a few intact carriers trying to regroup. 60 human ships still burned forward, refusing to give an inch. Then everything changed. The Zanzi dreadnought, massive, armored, arrogant, began to turn, not towards the battle, but away from it. Retreat.
The great war machine of the spiral arm, the species that had conquered worlds in days, was running. The humans didn't cheer. They didn't pause. They didn't ask for terms. They launched something instead. It took us a moment to realize what we were seeing. Dropships. Hundreds of them. 500 per carrier, nearly 1,500 troop transports shot forward at terrifying speed. Not towards the battlefield, towards the fleeing Zanzi ships. The Zanzi dreadnought never saw them coming. None of their commanders imagined humans would dare something so reckless, and the Zanzi certainly didn't imagine the dropships were using FTL microjumps to close the distance. The probe caught the moment they struck. Each transport buried itself into a Zanzi hull, clamps locking into place, cutting torches blazing. They looked like metal insects biting a beast 1,000 times larger than themselves. Then, jump signatures. Hundreds of them. The troop transports and the humans inside vanished into FTL with their unwilling hosts attached. The Zanzi dreadnought, 3 carriers, scores of escorts. Gone. The human fleet held position over Mars, hovering in eerie silence, waiting, watching, almost daring the Zanzi to come back. But the Zanzi didn't return. They couldn't. For the first time in living memory, a full Zanzi fleet had been broken, shattered by a world they'd dismissed as primitive. A single species, 8 billion strong, stubborn as bedrock, inventive as wildfire, had stood toe-to-toe with the most feared military in the galaxy, and won. Not through ancient weapons, not through divine intervention, not through numbers, but through speed, through adaptation, through that terrifying, unstoppable human instinct to fix, build, improve, and never, ever give up. The humans weren't conquering anything, but they had made something absolutely clear. No one touches the people under their protection. Not anymore.
The galaxy thought the story ended at Mars. A brave stand, a surprising victory, a retreating enemy licking their wounds. But the truth was darker, sharper, more unbelievable. Because the Zanzi weren't finished. They couldn't be. Their pride wouldn't allow it. A single defeated fleet? Embarrassing, yes, but survivable. A dreadnought missing? Costly, but still replaceable. In their minds, the humans had delivered nothing more than a scratch to the mighty Zanzi Empire. So they began to gather everything they had left. 4 full fleets, every flagship, every carrier, every battleship not tied to homeworld defense, rallied at the edge of Zanzi space. Their plan was simple: crush the humans, reclaim the Danik, erase the humiliation. It was a war machine so large the Coalition Senate quietly pretended it didn't exist. No one wanted to stand between the Zanzi and their revenge. They believed their dreadnought was destroyed. They believed their admiral died with it. They believed the humans were still celebrating back on Earth, unaware of the storm about to roll over them. They believed a lot of things. They were wrong about all of them. Because when those 4 fleets arrived at their rendezvous point, clittering with weapons, engines hot, crews hungry for blood, they found a shape waiting for them. Not debris, not silence. A ship. Their missing dreadnought. Hovering calmly in the void, surrounded by the carriers and battleships that had vanished with it, every cannon pointed directly at the incoming Zanzi fleets. The admirals froze. According to every protocol, every tactical doctrine, every ounce of military sanity, they should have hailed the ship, verified identity, demanded an explanation. They didn't, because as the dreadnought rotated, they saw something terrifying. All 4 planet-killer guns were fully charged. That should have been impossible. Those cannons drained power like dying stars. No dreadnought fired them at full charge without prepping for hours, and certainly no sane commander kept them charged in idle stance unless they were waiting for a target. The admirals shouted orders. Evasive, raise shields, power the reactors, scattered formations. Too late. The dreadnought fired. All 4 cannons unleashed at once, 4 spears of pure annihilation, each one bright enough to scar sensor arrays. The beam struck the leading flagship's dead center. The blast didn't vaporize them. Planet killers aren't designed for pretty explosions. They cripple. They punch through every shield, every reactor, every backup system a ship has. They leave the metal carcass dead and drifting. 4 Zanzi flagships, pride of an empire, went dark in seconds. Their admirals watched their displays go blank. They watched their reactors fail. They watched power die around them like a heartbeat fading. And through the massive bridge windows, they watched something else. Dozens of human ships jumped in. 60 of them, the exact fleet that had beaten their first armada over Mars. The humans didn't fire immediately. They waited. Every cannon trained on the helpless flagships, every fighter wing circling like sharks, every dropship bay open. The message was unmistakable. This was not a revenge strike. It was a warning. And then the carriers released their strike craft. A wave of human fighters and boarding ships washed across the 4 dead flagships like a tide of steel. In 4 days, the war, the great Zanzi war machine, was over. The Zanzi capitulated. Unconditional surrender. They freed every slave. They surrendered their technology. They signed away military control. And the worst humiliation? They signed ownership of their 5 remaining dreadnoughts to the Terran Union. Humans and Danik stood together on the newly formed council as those massive planet killers drifted above the Zanzi homeworld, silent and watching. For the first time in recorded history, the Zanzi weren't feared. They were afraid. Because never before had the greatest military force in the galaxy been torn apart, turned inside out, and weaponized against itself. Not by an ancient empire, not by a superpower, not by a coalition, but by a single world. A world of stubborn, loud, inventive, infuriating beings who refuse to let cruelty stand. A world everyone else ignored. A world we called primitive. Earth. The humans had risen, and nothing would ever be the same again.
If you've never seen an empire crumble, let me tell you, it doesn't fall like a tower tipping over. It collapses inward. Quiet at first, then all at once. That's what happened to the Zanzi. 4 days after their fleets went dark, their homeworld found itself staring up at sky filled with their own dreadnoughts, now controlled by humans and Danik crews. Those denizen planet killers hovered in silent formation, each one a reminder that power had changed hands and the old order was gone. The Zanzi Senate tried to stall, tried to threaten, tried to negotiate from a position they no longer held. But you can't negotiate with your own guns aimed at your capital. So they surrendered. Not conditionally, not diplomatically, completely, unconditionally, on their knees. They freed every enslaved species. They dismantled their military command. They signed over mining rights, trade routes, even border militias. The Terran Union, barely a year old, became the new center of gravity in the galaxy. And the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Coalition? They pretended they'd always supported Earth. They scrambled to rewrite their records, polish their speeches, act like they weren't the same people who dumped the Danik on humanity hoping they'd die quietly out of sight. The fringe empires? They armed themselves, not out of hostility, but for fear. The humans had just broken the unbeatable. What did that make them? The smaller races? They saw something else. They saw hope.
Because if a species nobody believed in, a species famous for failure, infighting, and orbital junk could stand up to tyranny, maybe they could too. And the Zansi, they didn't know what to be. Their pride was gone, their fleets gone, their dreadnoughts, symbols of their supremacy, now floating above their own world like judgment made manifest. The Terran Union didn't demand tribute or territory. Humans didn't want thrones or parades. What they demanded was far more devastating. You will never treat another species the way you treated the Danik. For a race raised on conquest, that was a deeper cut than any weapon. But the greatest wound came later. A Zansi historian asked a human diplomat a simple question. How did you do it? How did you defeat us in a single year? The human didn't brag, didn't boast, didn't speak of ingenuity or bravery or destiny. He just shrugged and said, "We hurt our friends." That answer spread faster than any fleet ever had. Across the galaxy, in outposts, trade hubs, border stations, people repeated it like a revelation. They didn't win for glory. They didn't win for empire. They didn't win for power. They won because they refused to let someone else suffer alone. Because they took in the Danik, billions of strangers, and saw them not as burdens, not as refugees, but as people worth fighting for. And no military doctrine, no tactical genius, no dreadnought cannon has ever been more dangerous than that. The Zansi Empire didn't fall because humans were stronger. It fell because humans were stubborn enough to protect someone weaker. And that terrified every tyrant, warlord, and slaver in the galaxy. Because if humans could change the fate of one species, what else were they capable of?
I didn't sleep the night before the counterstrike. Nobody did. Not on Earth, not in orbit, not on the shattered fronts where our armies had once stood tall. The truth is, we weren't preparing for victory. We were preparing for extinction. But humans have this problem, a stupid, reckless, wonderful problem. We don't go quietly. So while the enemy armadas aligned above us like a steel storm, humanity lined up every ship, every drone, every improvised weapon that could stay in the air for more than 10 seconds, and we pointed them right back at the monsters who thought they'd broken us. I remember standing on the deck of the Ragnarok, listening to the engines scream as we climbed through the atmosphere. The ship was shaking so hard the hull groaned like it wanted to tear itself apart. My hands were trembling, my voice was gone, my heart felt like a bomb wired to blow. And yet, I'd never felt more alive, because for the first time since Vega 9, I wasn't running from the truth. I was charging straight into it. When we broke through the cloud cover, I finally saw it. The enemy fleet, a curtain of black metal blotting out the stars. Every instinct screamed at me to dive, to hide, to turn the ship around. But then I saw Earth below us. Blue, scarred, burning in places, but still beautiful, still ours. And a strange calm settled over me. Maybe that's when I understood why humans terrify the galaxy. It isn't our tech, it isn't our numbers, it's sure as hell not discipline. It's the way we fight, even when the math says you're dead. It's the way we drag ourselves forward, covered in the ashes of every failure. It's the way we protect what's ours, even when the universe says we don't have the right. Up there, staring at that impossible wall of alien steel, I realized something. Humans don't hope. We decide. And that decision, the collective, stubborn, irrational choice of one broken species, changed everything. The order came through comms. Ragnarok Squadron, engage. The sky erupted. Missiles streaked past like burning arrows. Ships detonated in clouds of shrapnel.
The enemy fired beam after beam, carving huge wounds into the dark. And somehow, by either miracle or madness, our ships slipped through gaps that shouldn't have existed. My gunner screamed coordinates, my navigator shouted warnings, the hull alarms howled like hungry wolves. But amid the chaos, I saw something I'll never forget. Human ships weren't retreating. Not one. Some were on fire, venting atmosphere, flying crooked with half a wing left, but they pressed forward anyway. They hit the enemy lines like a tidal wave made of metal, fury, and desperation. And for the first time since this war began, I saw the enemy hesitate. Just for a second. Just long enough. "Captain," my gunner yelled, "you're not going to believe this. Earth's surface batteries just activated." That wasn't possible. The entire grid was supposed to be offline. But then I saw it. A beam, bright enough to turn the night sky white, shot straight up from the planet and cut through an enemy flagship like it was made of wet paper. Cheers exploded across comms. Real, raw, disbelieving joy. Someone yelled, "Humanity is back!" and it felt like the whole galaxy heard it. I don't know how long the battle lasted. Minutes, hours, lifetimes. But I remember the moment the enemy line buckled. I remember the roar of human ships pushing through their formation. I remember the light of burning cruisers reflecting off Earth's oceans like falling stars. And I remember the message that crackled through the fleet, spoken by a commander who sounded like he was laughing and crying at the same time. For Vega 9, for every world they took, finish it. We did. When the last enemy ship burned, when the sky finally went dark again, every pilot sat in stunned silence, listening to their own breathing. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were something far more dangerous, a species with nothing left to fear. I thought I'd feel relief, or triumph, or maybe grief for everything we'd lost. But what I felt was simpler, a quiet, heavy realization humming deep in my chest. This wasn't the end of the war. This was the moment humanity stepped onto the galactic stage and the universe finally understood who it was dealing with. They came to conquer us. They left running. And the next time the stars look down at Earth, they'll remember the day the sky learned our name.
I thought victory would feel cleaner. You know, a moment where the lights come back on, people spill into the streets cheering, and the universe finally makes sense again. But that's not how war ends. Not for us. Not for anyone. When the enemy fleet fell, the sky went quiet. Too quiet. It felt like the whole planet was holding its breath, waiting for the next punch. Even in our triumph, there was this weight, a reminder that winning a battle doesn't erase the scars carved along the way. And we had a galaxy's worth of scars. We spent 3 days searching the wreckage fields, 3 days pulling twisted metal out of the upper atmosphere, 3 days listening to the silent comms of ships that never answered back. Names I knew, voices I'd trained with, people who should have been celebrating with us. Gone. I kept thinking about my squad from Vega 9. 53 of us walked into that hell. I walked out alone. Humans don't handle survivor's guilt the other species do. We don't bury it. We don't ignore it. We carry it like fuel. And standing there, staring at the burned remains of yet another friendly ship drifting lifeless above Earth, all I could think was we paid for this victory with pieces of ourselves we'll never get back. On the 4th day, while Command tried to reassemble what was left of our defense grid, something unexpected happened. A message. Encrypted. Old tech. Alien, but ancient by their standards. It didn't come from the enemy's territory. It came from their prisoners, the ones we thought were dead. My blood went cold as the signal was decoded. A voice, trembling, exhausted, broken by years of silence, whispered through the speakers. "If you can hear this, humanity, listen. The ones you fought, they aren't the real threat. They were running too." The room froze. Every commander, every officer, every surviving pilot, none of us breathed. The voice continued. "There's something worse coming. Something older. They're looking for you. All of you." Static swallowed the rest. The transmission cut out. Without warning, without coordinates, without a signature. Just a warning, delivered by someone who sounded days from death. And just like that, the high of victory evaporated. Late that night, I found myself alone in the observation dome. Earth hung below, scarred but alive. My reflection floated in the glass, tired eyes, a face too young for the weight it carried. Behind me, the galaxy sprawled in silence. Millions of worlds, billions of lives, and something out there, hidden in the dark, searching for us, for humans, the same species they once mocked as primitive, the same species they tried to wipe out, the same species that refused to die. Part of me wanted to run, part of me wanted to scream, but a bigger part, the human part, felt something else, something dangerous, a spark. Because if something worse really was coming, if the galaxy expected us to roll over, to hide, to surrender, they clearly hadn't been watching the same war I had. At dawn, Earth's sky filled with the silhouettes of returning ships, some limping home, some burned nearly black, all bearing the marks of a battle we had no right to win. Command's message was simple. We rebuild. We prepare. Humanity stands together, now and forever. For the first time, alien species across the rim reached out to us for help. They'd seen what we did. They knew what we were capable of, and they feared the same thing we did, the shadow moving behind our enemies. The war wasn't over. It had barely even started. But this time, we weren't alone, and we weren't the ones being hunted in the dark. The galaxy wanted humanity to step back. Instead, we stepped forward. Because the truth is, humans don't wait for monsters to find us. We go looking for them.
I used to believe victory would feel clean, triumphant, maybe even righteous. But standing here now, staring at what's left of the Zanzi Imperium, I understand something far heavier. No one wins a war like this. They only survive it. The Terran Union didn't celebrate when the final surrender came through. There were no parades, no anthem-shaking crowds, just a long, exhausted silence, like the whole species let out one breath at the same time. Humans, they didn't roar, they rebuilt, and the Danik, they wept. Not because they were broken, but because for the first time in their species' history, someone had chosen to stand between them and annihilation. Humans called it the decent thing to do. The rest of the galaxy called it insanity. Zanzi called it impossible. But here we were. 5 captured dreadnoughts hovered like silent executioners over the Zanzi homeworld. No shields, no weapons raised, just the threat of what could happen if they ever tried this madness again. And yet the most shocking thing wasn't the weaponry. It was mercy. Humans refused to enslave the Zanzi, refused to purge them, refused to take their worlds. Instead, they demanded something else. You will rebuild what you broke, and you will never raise a weapon against a weaker species again. Simple, direct, human. The Danik president, if you could call our terrified interim leader that, asked why the humans weren't taking revenge. One Earth leader shrugged and said, "We're builders, not tyrants. You've had enough of those." That sentence spread through the galaxy faster than any fleet ever had. And so we watched the unthinkable unfold. The same humans who reverse-engineered alien tech in months, the same humans who built ships in weeks, the same humans who stood toe-to-toe with the strongest military power ever known, now began teaching. Yes, teaching. They shared medical technology with the Danik. They sent engineers to rebuild our worlds. They assigned diplomats to help reform our government. And to my utter bewilderment, they even provided food shipments because apparently Earth had a bad habit of overproducing. The Zanzi expected cruelty, expected torture, expected the same domination they had shown every world they conquered. Instead, they found themselves sitting across tables with human negotiators, drinking bitter coffee and signing compliance treaties that didn't strip them of dignity, only their weapons. Humanity didn't just win the war, they rewrote the rules of power. But victory came with shadows. Whispers sparked across the stars. If they can defeat the Zanzi in a year, what else can they do? If they can build warships in days, how long until they build something worse? If they can turn refugees into a fleet, will they stop there? Fear spread like wildfire. Not because humans had conquered the galaxy, but because they didn't, because they chose not to. And nothing is more terrifying than a species with power that refuses to use it for domination. Those are the ones you can't predict. Those are the ones who change everything. As for me, I stood on the Danik homeworld, once burned black by Zanzi weapons, and watched human construction ships carve new valleys for rivers they were restoring. I watched children, Danik and human, chase drones through half-finished streets. I watched the first sunrise my people had seen in years without fear hanging over it. And I understood something that filled me with a mix of relief and dread. The galaxy had not been introduced to humanity, it had been warned. We didn't just survive because humans fought for us. We survived because humans saw something worth saving. And that might be the most dangerous thing of all.
I thought the galaxy would settle once the Zanzi surrendered. That peace, real peace, would finally arrive. But peace isn't a natural state. It's something you have to build, then guard, and then pray doesn't collapse under its own weight. And humans? Humans decided they were going to build it their way. Not with monuments, not with threats, not with fleets parked over every world. They built it with alliances, and with something far more dangerous: influence. Word spread across the spiral arms like a shockwave. Species who had watched the Zanzi terrorize them for decades suddenly found hope in a planet that, just a year earlier, had been surrounded by its own broken technology. Delegations lined up to speak with human diplomats. Some wanted protection, some wanted trade. Some simply wanted to understand how a species with only one inhabited world could defeat an empire. And humanity's answer was always the same: we don't want to rule you. We want to help you stand on your own. That terrified the Senate more than any dreadnought ever had. Because power you choose not to use, that's the kind that spreads without firing a shot. At first, it wasn't even a government, just a coalition between Earth, Luna, Mars, and the Danik. But when the humans rebuilt our worlds, when they shared their tech, when they opened their shipyards to us,
We weren't allies anymore. We were family. Within months, dozens of smaller species, races with no fleets, no armies, no hope, petitioned to join the Terran Union. They wanted what the Danik had found, a home that didn't demand tribute or sacrifice in return. And that's when everything changed, because humans accepted them, all of them, even the ones the Senate had written off as non-essential, primitive, or economically useless. Earth didn't care. Humans didn't calculate worth. They only saw people who needed help. And that changed the balance of the galaxy more than any battle ever could. When dozens of worlds joined the Terran Union, the Senate called it destabilizing. They summoned Earth to explain itself. Humans sent a single representative, a middle-aged woman with plain clothes, a stern face, and a voice that carried like she'd been arguing in government halls for decades. She walked into a chamber of 400 alien leaders and didn't even blink. One senator, a reptilian dignitary 3 times her height, snarled, "Humanity is absorbing worlds at an alarming rate. This is conquest by diplomacy." She leaned forward, tapped her datapad, and said, "We're not conquering, we're listening, something you should try." The chamber erupted, but she didn't stop. "These species came to us because you ignored them, because you let the Xansi crucify half the rim worlds, because you only protect planets that benefit you. We protect planets because it's the right thing to do." The Senate fell silent. No threats, no weapons, just the truth. And the truth cut deeper than any blade. Their empire had collapsed almost overnight, but the humans didn't destroy them, didn't occupy their homeworld, didn't dismantle their society. They forced the Xansi to adopt fair borders, equal representation, freedom for all enslaved species, and strict demilitarization. And then, unthinkably, humans offered them aid. The Xansi responded with suspicion, then confusion, then something close to gratitude. But gratitude comes with fear. Because if mercy is what humans do to their enemies, what will they do to those who threaten them again? Even the Xansi didn't want to find out. I realized something when I saw the map of the new Terran Union. Earth wasn't building an empire. They were building a shield made of worlds that believed in them, because humanity believed in us. And every species who joined, every world that aligned itself with Earth, made the Union stronger. Not because of the military, but because of the idea behind it. Humans asked for one thing: help us make sure what happened to the Danik never happens again. And somehow, that was enough to reshape the galaxy. But beneath all the hope and rebirth, beneath the new alliances and rebuilt cities, there was a quiet tension growing. Something was coming. Something the humans hadn't planned for. Something the galaxy hadn't seen in thousands of years. And when the first signal arrived, every sensor station in the Terran Union lit up at once. Something enormous, something old, something not from this part of the galaxy had just crossed into our space. And humanity, for the first time since the Xansi War, felt the weight of danger settle on their shoulders again. But this time, they weren't alone. The warning arrived at 0319 Terran Standard. A single pulse, one burst of energy so massive it tripped sensors across 50 worlds at once. For a moment, every display in every Union control room flickered and then went black. Not offline, not damaged, overridden. The message that followed was just 3 words: no signature, no origin point, just a ripple through space that felt ancient, older than the Xansi, older than the Coalition, older than anything the archives had ever recorded. We had no idea who we was, but humans reacted instantly, the way they always do when danger knocks. They got to work. Within minutes, human engineering ships lifted off from every world in the Union, not carrying weapons, but relays, satellites, and deep space nets.
They rebuilt the entire sensor grid in 12 hours, a job that should have taken 3 months. Danik technicians followed them, patching systems and extending communications. Naren terraformers scanned local star fields. Even the timid, dust-covered Brillants, the newest members of the Union, sent every drone they had to help. Everyone moved, everyone contributed, because everyone felt it. Something was coming. And this time, humanity wasn't the target. The galaxy was. The Emergency Council met on Lunabase, the same place humans had first rebuilt after the Danik War. Representatives from every allied species sat at a circular table. No hierarchy, no throne, no dominant seat. Earth insists on circles. Everyone sees everyone, they say. The human commander opened the meeting with a sentence that chilled us. This signal wasn't aimed at us. It was a broadcast. Someone wants the whole galaxy to know they're back. The Danik elder asked what everyone else was thinking. Back from where? No one answered. Until a human scientist, quiet, glasses half-fogged, voice trembling, spoke up. Not from hyperspace, not from subspace, from outside the known dimensions. A silence fell so thick it felt physical. Something not from our galaxy, no, not from our reality, had sent that message. The Zanzi send a warning. It was the last thing anyone expected. A Zanzi courier ship, unarmed, arrived at the Union border requesting sanctuary. They carried a single passenger, High Admiral Tazeth, once the most feared name in the coalition. He looked thinner, older, haunted. The humans let him speak, and his voice shook when he said, "My people were not the first to build an empire. We were survivors of another's collapse. You call them ancients, we call them the architects. And if they have returned, every world in the galaxy is already in danger." The room froze. Danik, human, Brillant, Naren, every species at that table suddenly understood. This wasn't politics, this wasn't territory, this wasn't war. This was extinction. A Danik general asked the question on everyone's mind. Do we run? The humans didn't even hesitate. The Terran president leaned forward, hands clasped, eyes steady. No, running is how the galaxy survived until now. We're done surviving. We stand. A murmur swept the table, not fear, resolve. Because here's the thing humanity inspires, and I still don't know if it's bravery or madness. When humans stand, others stand with them. The Union voted unanimously. Every world, every race. The decision was simple. Prepare for contact, prepare for war, prepare for whatever the architects were bringing back with them. Hours later, the rebuilt sensor grid pinged, a distortion far beyond the outer rim. Then another, then dozens. A wall of energy, like a storm front across the void, crept closer. And inside that distortion, ships, enormous, silent, older than the stars, architect vessels, returning. And for the first time since the Zanzi invasion, I saw fear in a human's eyes. But beneath that fear, there was something else, something sharper, stronger, more dangerous. Determination. Human determination. The kind that had turned refugees into fleets. The kind that had broken the Zanzi Empire in a year. The kind that had rebuilt half the galaxy in a year. The kind you don't bet against. Because when something ancient returns, there's only one species reckless enough to say, "Let them come."
The architects did not arrive with fanfare. They did not declare their intentions. They did not posture like conquerors or roar like warlords. They simply appeared.
One moment, the void beyond the rim was empty, quiet, cold, familiar. The next, their ships slid out of the distortion like ghosts drifting through a doorway no one else could see. At first, the fleet seemed small, a handful of dark, needle-shaped vessels, no engines, no heat signatures, no visible weapons, just presence, ancient and patient. It felt like watching a storm gather, silent, slow, inevitable. But the sensors disagreed. The readings spiked so hard, half the displays shut down. Each ship carried enough energy to vaporize a continent. And there were dozens, then thousands more, still phasing in behind them, like a colony of predators slipping through the cracks of reality. Humanity had faced overwhelming odds before, but this was something else entirely. Every world watched the live feed, every station, every settlement, even the smallest outposts on mining moons, crowded around flickering screens. I was sitting beside the human commander aboard Helios Station, a Danik-built base orbiting the Union border. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles went white, but his voice, calm, steady, human. We hold position, no weapons, no aggression. A Danik officer turned toward him, terrified. "Commander, they dwarf us." "Yes," he said, "so running won't help." That was humanity, unreasonable, fearless, maddeningly brave. The architects did not speak through radio or light or sound. They spoke directly into our minds, a whisper, cold and collective. This galaxy was ours. We left you its ashes. Now we reclaim what remains. Every being in the Terran Union felt it. Humans staggered. Danik clutched their heads. Even the Zansi, watching from their demilitarized world, fell to their knees. And then, as suddenly as it came, the voice vanished, leaving the galaxy in a suffocating silence. The Terran president stepped forward to the comms console. Her message was broadcast not through subspace, not through the grid, but through the same channel the architects had used. And somehow, she reached them. This galaxy isn't empty. It's full of people, full of lives, full of futures you don't get to erase. Her voice didn't shake. We abandoned this place. We didn't. And we're not giving it back. The room went still. Even I, a Danik, raised in a culture terrified of conflict, felt something like pride burn inside my chest. The architects answered. Their voice filled the minds of billions at once. Then you will die with it. And just like that, the first wave of architect ships shifted. Their hulls, smooth as obsidian, peeled open like petals, revealing impossible machinery inside, weapons older than planets. The first strike was seconds away. Humans knew this. They didn't panic. The commander turned to his fleet. Shields up, form the wall. No one breaks. The Danik captain beside him whispered, "They'll annihilate us." "Maybe," he said, "but they're not going through us." And a grid of human, Danik, Naran, and brilliant ships locked formation, a wall against an ocean. The largest architect vessel rotated its spines, building energy. A deep hum rolled through space. Every sensor screamed. A single shot from that weapon could shatter a moon. And then, just as the beam ignited, something impossible happened. The architect weapon misfired. The light scattered, fracturing like broken glass. The entire ship shuddered. Their weapon had been disrupted, not by the Union fleet, but by something behind them. Sensors lit up again. Another breach, bigger than the first. A new fleet emerged, not ancient, not familiar, but unmistakably engineered, sleek, angular, deadly, but not hostile. They came in firing, not at us, but at the architects, and the architects recoiled, not confused, not angry, afraid. The Terran commander stared at the feed, stunned. Who the hell? The newcomers broadcast a single message, not in our minds, but through open channels. A voice, metallic, layered, urgent. Terran Union, hold the line. We are the children of the architects, and we are here to end them. Humanity wasn't facing one ancient empire. They were standing in the middle of a civil war that began before their sun even formed. The architects had returned to reclaim the galaxy, but their own creations, their own descendants had returned to stop them. And now the Terran Union was caught between both.
I used to think surrender was the end of a soldier's story. But sitting here, in a quiet human outpost, alive only because they let me live, I realize surrender is where the truth finally begins. The humans gave me a room, not a cell, not a cage, a room, a bed, water, even a window, as if they wanted me to see their world rebuilding itself. No chains, no interrogations, just waiting, watching me, studying me. I thought it was mercy. Now I'm not sure. It began with a low hum under the floor, like the outpost itself had started breathing. Human soldiers sprinted through the halls, gear half on, helmets clipped at the side, shouting to one another. Command just flagged a full-spectrum breach. Get to staging, now! I stepped into the hallway, confused, unarmed, unsure whether I was allowed to move. A human guard, someone I'd spoken with, someone who once offered me food, grabbed my arm. But not to restrain me, to pull me along. You're coming with us, stay close, don't get clever. I didn't understand. Why save me during their own emergency? Then I saw the screens, dozens of warnings, system-wide alerts, fleet movements, unknown signatures, except not unknown. I recognized them immediately. They were ours. The Empire had arrived, not to rescue me, not to negotiate. They came to erase the last witness. She walked in like a storm, calm on the surface, lightning underneath. The same commander who captured me on Vega 9. Her armor carried scorch marks, her voice carried exhaustion. Your empire sent a cleansing fleet. I swallowed hard. They believe I betrayed them. She shook her head. They're not here for you. They're here for us. A chill went through me. Humans hadn't mobilized like this even during the final battles. This was different, focused, cold, purposeful. They think destroying this outpost will slow us down. Will it? I asked. Her helmet sealed over her face. That was my answer. From the bunker window, I watched the first enemy volley streak through the clouds. Our plasma cannons lit up the sky, turning the atmosphere into a burning mosaic. Human fighters scrambled, engines screaming, shields flaring. And then the humans did something I still don't understand. They moved toward the fire, toward the impossible odds, toward ships 10 times their size. It wasn't bravery.
It wasn't madness. It was obligation. Every human was fighting like someone they loved was standing behind them, because someone was. Hours passed, or minutes. Battlefields distort time. The bunker doors slammed open. The commander stumbled in, armor half melted, blood down her neck. She handed me a data slate. This contains everything. Proof of how the war started, proof of our counter-response, proof your empire will try to bury. Why give this to me? I asked, terrified. She leaned close. For the first time, her voice shook. Because someone out there has to tell the truth, and it sure as hell won't be us. She turned away, then paused. When you run, don't look back. My heart's froze. Run? Before she answered, the ceiling above us detonated. Light, heat, screaming metal. The whole world came down in a roar. When the dust settled, she was gone. I don't know how I made it out. Through fire, through rubble, through the dead. I crawled until my hands bled, stumbled until my vision blurred. Now I'm hiding under a shattered transport wing, recording this message. The data slate is beside me. My empire is hunting me. The humans, they're still fighting overhead. I don't know who will find this recording. Maybe no one will. But if you're hearing this, if anyone is hearing this, remember what I'm about to say. Humans didn't win because they're stronger. They won because they refuse to abandon each other, even when the entire galaxy tells them to. You can burn their cities, break their armies, crush their worlds, but you cannot break their loyalty, and you cannot outrun their vengeance. Because once a human decides you're worth fighting for, you're already too late.